Brawley, and I volunteer with Common Cause Connecticut. Common Cause is a member of Hartford Votes, Hartford Vota Coalition, and has sponsored tonight's program. We are a coalition of 13 nonprofit and government agencies designed to increase voter engagement in Hartford. Each member is listed in your program. Tonight's forum is intended to inform you of the candidates that will be running for the Democratic primary ballot on August 12th for the 2nd District Senate seat and the 7th District Assembly District seat. The candidates' photos and their bios are also in your program. In your program is a schedule of tonight's events, the description of the format, and ground rules. We ask that at this time you turn off all cell phones or put them on vibrate. We also ask during the questionnaire portion of the event that you speak briefly. Also, there is a feedback form in the program. We ask that you complete it before you leave. And I also wanted to mention that this program will be documented and videotaped. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Seth Lemon. Seth is a news reporter for NBC Connecticut. He has come to Channel 30 from NBC Washington, D.C. He has worked for 4 years in the Immigration Review of the Department of Justice. Seth is a Hartford resident, and we are glad that he has agreed to moderate our program. Thank you, and have a good event.
Good evening. Good evening. I can tell you all are already spirited and fired up and excited to hear what the candidates have to say. I guess we should start by having them introduce themselves. We can start from this side with our senatorial candidates and go down the line. If you could just say your name and what you're running for.
Len Walker, 2nd Senatorial District.
My name is Eric Coleman. I am the state senator from the
Sean Wooden, Hartford City Council President, the endorsed Democrat for the 2nd Senatorial District.
Donna Thompson Daniel. I'm running for the 7th District, District State Rep. Thank you.
Douglas McCoy, 7th District State Representative.
All right. Now, just to explain how the format is going to work, everyone is going to get a chance to talk equally. We're going to keep things fair and balanced here. Each of the candidates will be asked one individual question. They'll have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidates will also get a chance to respond, but only for a minute, and we will rotate in between the state senatorial candidates and the representative candidates just to keep things mixed up a little bit. All right, so let's begin with our 3 senatorial candidates. If you could step up to the mics, please. Your first question. We will start on the left side. To balance the state's budget, do you believe that taxes have to be raised? And if yes, which taxes do you recommend be increased?
Raising taxes is a touchy subject. I don't agree that we should raise taxes. We should use raising taxes as a last resort. I think that people are burdened already with what they have in the 3 towns in this district, Windsor, Bloomfield, and Hartford. People pay enough as it is. Hartford has one of the highest mill rates around. It's what, 0.74? Bloomfield has about 23 to 30. So on a $100,000 house, you're going to pay $7,000, about $400 for that particular house in taxes. Whereas if you were in Bloomfield or Windsor, you'd pay less than that. You'd pay probably $3,000. So you're paying about 1.5 more in the city of Hartford. And when we talk about raising taxes, let's expand on this somewhat. The city gets about $393.5 million annually from the state of Connecticut. That's a lot more than the other towns in the district gets. So we need to hold some people's feet to the fire to say, if you're going to have the privilege of using our tax dollars that people work real hard for, you need to explain yourself. What are you doing with that $393 million? So my answer, in short, is no, find some other means. Think outside the box and come up with other means to run a town, run the district, or run the state.
All right, thank you. Mr. Coleman, would you like to respond?
Thank you. I would agree insofar as raising taxes should be a last resort. I would slightly disagree in as much as I think under the 12 years of former Governor Rowland and former Governor Rell, many of the wealthy in the state and many of the largest and major corporations enjoyed some very significant tax breaks. I think an examination of our tax code and some of the loopholes that corporations benefit from, and maybe some greater progressivity in our income tax so that those at the upper end of the scale may pay a fairer share than is the case today. I think that would go a long way towards solving some of our budget difficulties.
All right, and Mr. Wooden.
So obviously there's consensus here that nobody likes higher taxes or raising taxes. The state has done that. Certainly at the city level, I've struggled and have been one of the strongest forces in terms of resisting increasing expenses and raising taxes. And so on the state level, the state was horribly mismanaged for a number of years. And so I agree that taxes should be a last resort. And this is over a number of governors. And so we ended up in this situation. There was a $3.1 billion deficit, and there were very few options. The real answer to that is to manage our state in a much more fiscally responsible manner and to radically overhaul our tax structure to a much more progressive system. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, let's now welcome to the stage our candidates for Connecticut's 7th Assembly District. And in the fairness of things, we'll start with the lady. Ms. Thompson-Daniel, what is your position on the Common Core standards? And if you do not support them, what do you propose in their place?
Well, I will tell you this. I am not aware or sure of that answer. So can I say that?
Yes, but
Okay.
speak into the mic so everyone can hear you.
I am not, I'm truthful, so I don't know what that is, and I will leave that to Mr. McCrory.
Mr. McCrory?
Same question.
Yes.
There's a great deal of issues concerning the Connecticut core standards because they have been adopted nationally, but every state has adopted them locally. And basically the standards that we're talking about, educational standards for our children in the state of Connecticut. There's a great deal of controversy behind this issue because most people feel like we don't need one standard for everyone. There should be no one size fit all for our children. And a lot of the things that they're trying to press down on an earlier age, they're basically trying to revolutionize the way we educate our children. So right now, I understand them. They need to be vetted a little more. There's some good things about them, but right now, I think we need to get back to our basics of reading, writing, and mathematics. And once we start teaching our children at an early age and giving them those basic foundations, then we can do Common Core, CMT, or CAP. It doesn't matter if we get to the true basics of educating our children at an early level. So Common Core, Connecticut Core, that's really not the issue. The really issue is giving our children a quality education at the beginning of the years.
Thank you, sir. All right, thank you, representatives. Let's call back to the stage our senatorial candidates. All right, we're going to get deep really quickly. We'll start with Senator Coleman in the middle. Some Connecticut residents want to repeal the expansion of gun safety laws. What is your position? Are you in favor of a repeal? And if so, will it be a priority for you?
Gun safety is a priority of mine. We just need to look around the nation in order to appreciate the tragedy that free access to guns has. And I'm not talking about repealing the Second Amendment, but I do think that all of the amendments to our state and federal constitution have limits. They're not absolute. And when you take into consideration some of the things that have happened, including what has happened in our own state, on the streets of Hartford and Bridgeport and New Haven, as well as incidents like the one that took place in the Sandy Hook, I think some better and stronger regulation is in order. In the last couple of years, in my role as the state senator from the 2nd Senatorial District, I was actively involved in the task force that was created by the legislature to examine gun safety and gun regulation in the state of Connecticut. And I'm proud to say that as a result of that participation, Connecticut has some of the strongest gun safety and gun regulation laws in the nation. And I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
Mr. Council President, would you like to respond?
Sure. I would not support a repeal of that gun control measure. My problem with that bill, however, is that a lot of the issues that we face in the urban centers were not sufficiently addressed in that bill. And it's tragic, and and our hearts weep for the people of Newtown. And I get it. As a father myself, it was painful to watch that. But the response did not sufficiently address so many of the challenges that day in and day out for decades that we struggle with in urban centers. And so that's my issue. And we need to have a much more robust focus on young people, and not just at the end of a barrel of a gun, but at the beginning of their life, and giving them the opportunities and making those investments. And it's tragic when we don't. And we will continue this young person to school to drop out to prison pipeline.
Thank you, Mr. Wooden.
I'm proud of the efforts made by the residents of Connecticut to put together those gun restrictions. Too many of our young people find themselves out on the streets with a lot of free time on their hands, and a lot of guns are too readily available in our communities. I think it was Joe Biden who said, if people want to talk about using guns as a means of protection, that they should go buy a shotgun. It made sense. If your argument is that I need protection inside of my house, a shotgun is an effective tool. But these handguns have proliferated our streets. In the city, I've worked with kids, and I've seen what they do. I work in a hospital, and I see these young kids coming in all torn up. If we could do more, we should do more. Ban most of them, especially the assault-type weapons.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. All right, thank you, senatorial candidates. Let's welcome back up our representatives. All right, this time we will start with Mr. McCrory. The University of Connecticut says that Hartford is considered a food desert, meaning that there's very little access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and this particularly hits hard for residents of the North End. What have you done or will you do to address this issue?
Well, first, I agree the University of Connecticut is absolutely right. The North End of Hartford is a food desert, and we've been crying out for a grocery store for a number of years. So, and I've been one of those who've been leading that cry, and I know the value of grocery stores. My daddy had one ever since I was 2 years old and had them in the city of Hartford. So what I would do is I would continue to support organizations like HEDCO, where we provided $5 million in funding for minority businesses, so we can have a business, somebody in our community can set up a grocery store so we can service the needs of the people in our community. That's what I would do. And also, if that doesn't work, if that grocery store is too small, I would encourage, we give a lot of tax breaks to corporations and companies that come to the state of Connecticut, we do business. Why can't we underwrite a large chain grocery store, like a Stop and Shop or Seven, and have them come set up a shop right in the north end of Hartford? I'll be happy to give tax breaks for something like that. And that provides opportunities for employment for our children. So I'll love to do something like that. That's my response.
Thank you, Mr. McCrory. Ms. Thompson-Daniel?
I do agree with what the study shows, but I see it this way. Why should we bring in a Stop and Shop or a ShopRite into our community when we already have grocery stores who are here? And why don't we give them the tax breaks and help them become a food place for us to have fresh vegetables and fruit and juices and things like that? So why would we want to bring in someone from the outside when we already have people here who are trying to make a living? Why not help them out first?
Ms. Thompson-Daniel, noting the number of grocery stores, the small-owned ones in the city, what are you suggesting that we do to enable them to better complete this task of providing fresh fruits and vegetables?
Well,
because they're there.
Right. For instance, we have Carla's Market, who's in Blue Hills neighborhood. We also have Bravo, who's in the North End. Why not help them to expand, bring in a bigger component where they can expand and bring in fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, where they can compete on the bigger level instead of us bringing in new people who are not committed to Hartford or to the state of Connecticut.
All right. Thank you, candidates. Let's welcome back our senators. All right, so tolls on Connecticut highways were removed back in 1985, and a major reason was because that federal legislation at that time prohibited states with toll roads from using federal funds on road projects. That proved to be important with the Mianus River Bridge. Now, this year, since the White House has removed that long-standing prohibition, what's your position on reinstituting tolls on Connecticut highways to raise revenue? We will begin with Mr. Wooden.
Oh, I think we have to proceed very, very slowly with looking at that. It's been a long time, and there was a reason why it was restricted. With that said, the state, I know probably the key reason for looking at it is as an additional revenue source. And so I need to learn a lot more about what the revenues are and the downsides, but I do know that when you put up barriers, it makes it more expensive for businesses to conduct commerce across borders. And so we need to look at the full impact, both from a business perspective and a safety perspective from our residents.
All right. Mr. Walker?
I think one of the other reasons that were given why the tolls were removed, people made reference to the number of traffic accidents. I really think that was a play to get the folks out of Greenwich, not to pay the tolls to come into the city to work and get some decent pay. So I say bring those tolls back. Toll booths offered an opportunity for employment. People worked in there 3 separate shifts. They had benefits. Those were good jobs. And those toll booths brought in a lot of revenue to this state. Every other state or most states are doing it. You ever driven through New Jersey? That's a lot of money. I say bring them back. Forget everything about all the other excuses. We need revenue in this state.
All right, Senator Coleman.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Walker on this issue. I understand the reasons for the removal of the tolls, and some of it had to do with the political influence of Fairfield County. But if you listen to and read the reports of some of our bond rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's are saying that the state of Connecticut is ignoring sources of revenue. And somewhere down the line, that will have an impact upon the state's bond rating. We do need sources of revenue. The bordering states, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, when residents of Connecticut travel to those states, we have to pay tolls. I think there should be some reciprocity, and when they travel through Connecticut, they should make some contribution to our revenue and our budget.
All right, thank you, candidates. Ms. Thompson-Daniel, there's been a great deal of discussion on income equality and the gap between the rich and the poor. Just for example, the median household income in Hartford is between $19,000 and $33,000, while in Bloomfield and Windsor, they're both in the $70,000 range. What are your thoughts on these issues, and are there actions that you can take as a legislator?
Yes, my thought on the issue is that this. If you live in the city, if we're talking about the city of Hartford, you live in the city of Hartford, you should be able to get employment, gainful employment in the city of Hartford. You should not have to take what you have and go to another town to work or to be employed. So I'm finding here, and particularly in the city of Hartford, is that we tend to hire people from the outside instead of hiring our own people. And we need to learn to start doing that, because we're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to someone who does not have any knowledge of our city, or do they care about our city. So if we start hiring inside, I believe we'll be able to stop that disparity.
Mr. McCrory?
Just to add, and also a study came out not too long ago, says that 55% of our children are living below the poverty line in the city of Hartford. So I concur with what my colleague said, but those jobs that we're talking about, that city have a policy that says if you're the police chief, those $100,000 jobs, we need jobs for the everyday person in our communities. The mom and pop who go to work every day, who can make $30,000 and $40,000, $50,000. One of the biggest problems that no one has talked about, and I'm very disappointed about, the study came out a month ago. Hartford is the city in the United States with the highest number of homes in foreclosure and underwater. And no one's saying anything about it. So even though, what that tells you is even on the small incomes that we are making, we're able to afford homes, but now we can't afford to stay in them because the taxes are so high. So we need to do something like that. Of course, I believe we need to have jobs for the people that live in Hartford. If you live here and work here, you should stay here. Keep that tax dollar into the city of Hartford. I concur with that, but we also need to set up opportunities for young people to work and find jobs that they can do when they're coming out of school, or if they want to go on to college. And incentivize them from coming back into the city after they go to college.
Thank you, Mr. McCrory. Senators, to be.
Thank you, Seth.
We're going to speak things into existence here. All right. The state citizen election program is a voluntary program which provides public financing to qualified candidates, which allows them to run without having to worry about taking money from special interests or being influenced by them. Are you participating in the state citizen election program, and why or why not? Each of you will get a minute to respond, and I believe we started on the left side, so we'll begin with you. 2 minutes, forgive me.
I did sign up for to get matching contributions. I don't believe that within the next week I'll be doing that. I actually take a position that I'm in a better place if I can raise money without going to the taxpayers to ask them for a dole. So I signed up for the program, but I don't think I will be continuing to participate in it.
All right.
Thank you. I am a participant in the Citizens Election Program, and I think overall it's a good program. I think it balances the influence of money in politics. Prior to the program, those who were wealthy or could afford to make large and substantial contributions had, I think, more access to elected officials and decision makers than those of us who could only make meager contributions. And so for that reason, I think the program overall is very beneficial, especially to the decision-making and the whole political process. If I were to make some recommendations for improving, I would say there is some overly burdensome administrative oversight. Some of it, I think, quite unnecessary, and we ought to take a close look at some of the things that we can eliminate so that candidates, and particularly volunteer treasurers, are not overly burdened and harassed by the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wooden?
Yes, I am participating in the program as well. I think it's good to have publicly financed campaigns to diminish or to level the playing field. And during campaigns, and this has happened nationally, locally, so much time is spent raising money, in the absence of the system and talking to donors instead of talking to residents in the community. And so for that reason, I think it's very good. The problem fundamentally is that there is still a lot of special interest money in politics, right? And so pretending that this program has changed that is false. Part of that's a fault of the U.S. Supreme Court in terms of what they've allowed in and all of the, the legislative loopholes in the state of Connecticut that allows money to come in from this PAC, from this PAC, from that PAC. And so we still have too much money coming in from too many different sources, and they're not transparent. And so, so a lot more needs to be done before we truly level the playing field and for the electorate to really know the money that's funding all of the campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. You may have a seat. All right, just to remind everyone, each of the candidates at this point gets 2 minutes equally to respond. No.
She said no.
So it's going to be 2 and 1? All right, just kidding. All right, I believe that means that we're starting with Mr. McCrory this time. Mr. McCrory, what steps should be taken to make our schools safer?
Okay. Well, the knee-jerk reaction would say hire more security guards, but I don't think that's the issue. The issue is you have to change the climate and the culture of your schools. See, schools are safe when children go to school and they feel cared for, loved, and wanted, and they have a curriculum that they will want to learn from. It's not all about putting somebody in front of a school and put a uniform on. That's not going to stop the problems in our schools. The problem, what we really need in our schools is people who understand our children, who are connected to them culturally and competently, who want to be there, who knows the best interest, have the best interests of them, and children will make that school safe themselves. Our children can police themselves if you give them the opportunity. They're not crazy. They know right from wrong. Watch when they go to church or when they play a sport. It don't take much to stop a child from doing something inappropriately. So I don't think it's about the issues, because if you look at the tragedies that are taking place throughout this country in these schools, then a lot of them are not happening in urban communities. They're not happening in urban communities. So our children can police themselves. I think what we need is to change the culture and the climate of the schools so children feel welcome and wanted when they walk in their school day, and you will have a successful school year.
Thank you, Mr. McCrory. Ms. Thompson-Daniel?
My take on that is that our youth, when we send them to school, do we have a connection with their parents? Do our teachers, our principals have a connection with them? One way to resolve the problem is, I know as I grew up here in Hartford going to school, my teachers lived in my neighborhood, my police officers lived in my neighborhood, my principal lived in my neighborhood. So they knew my parents and I knew their children. So if we have a connection with the community And sometimes the schools do not have a connection with the community. Sometimes those principals do not live in our community, and they drive the opposite way out of town instead of going into town to visit with the families or to get to know the children or their parents. So to me, that's one of the main things, is how we can bring about some safe concerns in our school is by making sure that our principals and our teachers get to know our parents.
Thank you very much. You may take your seats. All right, because we're doing so well with time, I am going to moderate and make some changes really quickly. We're going to ask one more question of each of the candidates, but everyone is going to get 1 minute, and we will start with the candidates for senator. All 5 candidates are going to get the exact same question. All right, Mr. Wooden, we'll start with you. And this might be a bit of irony, but the City Council recently received a report from its property tax task force on how to make the property tax system more equitable. Many of the recommendations require action by state legislature. What will you do to address the property tax issue if you are elected?
So that is very appropriate to start with me. That task force, which I, along with the mayor, asked to be assembled, is to look at, a property tax problem is one of the most difficult challenges our city faces, and it's been for years. And so there were some very thoughtful recommendations made in that, and I think legislatively we have to advance that to the next step. And in terms of changing, we have the highest mill rate in the state. That is true. I joined the council 2.5 years ago and welcomed the highest mill rate in the state. We have to address that. And so there were recommendations in terms of the assessment ratio, but ultimately we have to cut government spending and control costs, have appropriate contract provisions, and work with the unions cooperatively to get a handle on this. And so legislatively, I would start to advance those recommendations and have some legislative. There's so much of this issue that relates to state legislation, and that's why the bulk of the report was about what state legislators need to do to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Wooden. Mr. Walker.
The taxes are an issue. They're an ever-present concern for folks in all towns, in all 3 towns, in the town of Windsor, the town of Bloomfield, and the city of Hartford. I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. Every town government has a difficulty in putting together budgets and making sure that the budgets work. I do believe that the city of Hartford needs to really look at how they're allocating funding that they're getting from the state. As council president, Mr. Wooden has to be the leader. The buck has to stop with him in coming up with innovative ways to address the tax burden on the residents in Hartford. It's just ridiculous, and it's way too high for people to work this hard and then to turn around and get them in foreclosure. Their houses are on the water, and then you sell those mortgages. Sell them so people are being put out of their house.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you. While I'll applaud the formation of the task force, I think the scope of the task force was not broad enough, and it was not broad enough in 2 respects. Number one, the challenge for the city of Hartford is to broaden its tax base. And part of the way you do that is to aggressively pursue businesses, hopefully manufacturing concerns that may be located out of state, and you aggressively recruit them to move their concern into the city of Hartford. The second thing is Mr. Wooden and all the other council members need to scrap the tax lien sale program, or the residents of the city of Hartford who find themselves faced with an arrearage in the payment of taxes are being absolutely exploited and abused by outside concerns.
Thank you,
that
Senator
program
Coleman.
needs to be scrapped or brought in-house.
Thank you, Senator. You may be seated. You can sit down. Thank you. Take your seats. We'll call up the representative candidates again. And just to remind you of the question, this is about the City Council receiving its report on property tax and how to make the system more equitable. It, of course, would require lots of action from legislature. So, as a legislator, what would you do? Ms. Thompson-Daniel.
As a legislator, I would figure out a way how the companies that we have in the city of Hartford specifically, if we talk about part of the city of Hartford, I would want to have them either pay taxes, because we do give a lot of tax breaks to businesses who are here in the city, and they give us nothing back. And I would love to have it where they are able to provide something for our people and our incentive and the people in the neighborhood. Now, last year, I was able to save 200 homes from the tax roll by having them enter into arrangement with the city of Hartford. With that program being said, we need to expand that program so that others can take advantage of that, to be able to pay their taxes, to be able to pay on time. Taxes are never going to go away. So we need to find a way to make sure that homeowners can afford their homes and pay the taxes that we have.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson-Daniel. And lastly, Mr. McCrory.
Can you repeat the question again?
The Hartford City Council received this report on property taxes. It's the task force report, and it came up with ideas on how to make the system more equitable. But a lot of those ideas require action from the state legislature. So as a member of it, what would you do?
Well, the first thing I'll do as a legislator, and what I've been doing and our colleagues been doing, is make sure Hartford gets its proper amount of pilot money from the state of Connecticut. See, the reality is in the city of Hartford, less than 50% of its property can be taxed, be put on a tax roll. Most of the other property, the state of Connecticut is responsible for giving those dollars. So we need to increase the pilot from the state of Connecticut first. Secondly, with our large corporations, they pay taxes, but they don't pay enough taxes. There's too many loopholes with them. One thing I would do, and if they don't want to pay the taxes, or we're going to keep the loopholes, we need to ask them or require them to hire people from the city of Hartford. You can stay there, but just put our people to work. So therefore, while we're working in the city of Hartford, we can pay our taxes, pay for our homes, pay for our cars, and pay for our property. So it can work both ways. Bring down the tax rate in the city of Hartford, put more businesses on the tax roll, expand your businesses in the city of Hartford, and encourage those businesses to hire our people, especially our young people who live in the city of Hartford. We have to incentivize and keep our people who live here staying here, or we're going to be in trouble.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McCrory. All right. Now we've come to the part of the program that I'm sure you all have been waiting for, the time where you get to ask the candidates questions. You look like you have a lot on your minds. If you have a question, you can line up at one of the microphones. All right, I will encourage you to keep your questions brief and succinct so that everyone can get an opportunity to ask what's on their minds. And sir, we will begin here with you.
Thank you. As a parent, my major concern is quality of life for the children. As a representative for this district, I believe that, and I grew up in an era where parents were not threatened by DCF for disciplining the children. And I think that if you don't get back to the root of that, our prisons and the juvenile systems are going to continuously be fed with our children. I want to know from each one of you, what do you do to provide a climate where I as a parent and all other responsible parents can bring up their children with the values and principles that they determine and not DCF or some other government agency?
If you'd like to respond.
Okay. I want to respond to you. I guess I go back to what I said earlier, is that we need to make sure that our teachers, our principals, and our parents are on the same accord. That way, we will be able to raise our children, because, like I said, when I grew up, my teachers lived in my neighborhood. So if I did something wrong, they were going to go back and tell my parent. But in the interim, we don't want parents who are leaving marks or abusing their kids either, and we don't want DCF raising them. So we want to work together as a group, as a community, to raise our children, and that's the best way. It's the best way as a village to be able to raise our children.
I'm sorry, Senator, sorry to interrupt. Just to be clear, each of the candidates is going to get a minute to be able to respond.
I agree with the concept of the village, and I think that as a community, we need to do more to take responsibility for the development of our young people. And one of the things that I think is counterproductive is the stress on budgets that cause people to make decisions to cut back after-school programs, whether they be recreational, theater programs, arts programs. What we need to be doing is to make certain that parents' efforts are supplemented by other responsible adults in the community. And if we have mentoring programs, character building programs, other types of programs where responsible adults are interacting and imparting values and community principles to young people, I think we would be tremendously better off. And at the same time, we would probably be building self-esteem and the talent and gifts of the young people in our community.
Thank you, Senator.
Real quickly, I think he's specific about DCF, and sometimes DCF is a little overreaching. The majority of the calls that go into DCF come from teachers in the school system, and that's the reality. And it goes back to, again, the climate and culture of the schools. You need to have teachers like me who live in the community, who was born in this community and is not leaving this community, and who have created programs that work for our children in this community. But we need also after-school programs that work. And I'm happy that I've been able to fund so many programs in our community that works well. Ebony Horsewomen, Upper Albany Connecticut, all the Artists Collective. These programs need to be continued to be support because they provide that help for our parents and for our teachers. So those things need to happen. Therefore, you won't have the situation you have where DCF is always being called to a school because a child might be acting out. You need to understand why that child acted out. That child might not have ate last night. That something tragic could have happened in that child's community last night. So therefore, sometimes DCF is a little overreaching and go beyond the steps they need to take. Thank you.
McCrory.
Representative McCrory, he makes an excellent point about the schools and that connection with DCF. We have struggled to take police officers out of the schools, and Councilwoman Cynthia Jennings has led the charge on this, and to start because it starts the early criminalization of young people's behavior that's treated differently in cities in particular than in suburban communities. But it's the same thing that leads to the calls to DCF. Now, I'm a strong believer in parental accountability, right? And so in terms of parents have to be held to high standards in terms of taking care of their children and raising their children. You know, and as a black man, I say we don't have enough of us actually doing that. And so I can stand here and say we need to, as a community, show leadership and be focused on that as well. But sometimes there is overreaching, and we have to check that, those of us who are in leadership positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wooden.
I would like to take it takes a village to raise a child to another level, to say, yes, there are 4 of us up here who are proud men of color. If each of us takes a couple hours, one side of the week, maybe every 2 weeks, and mentor some of these kids, these young kids who are acting up in their homes, and show them how important it is to have positive behaviors and help to guide them. A lot of these single mothers out here are really overwhelmed. I think we as leaders need to start helping out in the village. And there is DCF, yes, and there's parental responsibility. But we also need to have a good public safety presence in our schools. In Windsor, there's a resource officer. And every time there's a problem that develops, that resource officer is able to intervene to bring in the parents, maybe point that child towards a counselor.
Thank you very much. All right, sir, you're next. And why don't you start by telling us your name and where you live as well?
Yeah, I'm Mike McGarry. I live on Woodland Street. And I don't know if all of these men and women up here understand the crisis we have in rental housing in Hartford is dramatic. Rents are going to go up 100, 200, 300 bucks per unit in the next year and the year after that because of state legislation. We are the only city in the state to have a differential, meaning homes pay one level, apartments another, businesses another. The problem is that we've moved up the assessment for apartments, meaning this: if you have a $500,000 home, a nice home in the West End, you'll pay $11,000 in taxes. But if you have a $500,000 investment in a small apartment, it'll be $22,000. And who pays those taxes? The renter. Obviously, investor's not going to pay.
All right, sir, could you summarize your question?
So the question is, how would you balance that out? There are some suggestions: stop it at 60%, and charge your homeowners more. It's a tough question, but it has to be answered this year, or we're going to see apartments either huge rent increases or they're going out of business.
All right, let's give the candidates a chance to respond.
Thank you for the question. And as you know, I've worked with this from the city level and trying to work with the delegation. This is state law that requires these step-ups. Now, ultimately, I think the fundamental problem is, as a city, we don't have enough money, right? Our expenses are going up and our revenues are declining. And over the long term, right, so assessments are moving up on apartments, and apartment renters are going to be hit with that. We have to bring down the mill rate overall, and we have to slightly increase over a long period of time. I think ideally we need to get to a place where we don't have the differential. I think that's going to take some time and state legislation to change on it. And two, to dramatically bring down the mill rate. And the only way we get to doing that is by economic development and growing our grand lists in our city and bringing on primarily more commercial property and owners and investments to be able to tax those entities and reduce the burden on residential homeowners and small businesses and apartment owners.
Thank you, Mr. Wooden. Senator Coleman.
Yes, I'm sort of fascinated by that response because taxes in Hartford is a perennial issue. And every single year, the mayor and the city council people from Hartford come to the state legislature. It wasn't the state legislature that thought up the differential. It was a proposal that came from the city of Hartford and the request from the city of Hartford for the imposition of a differential. Now, I understand the problem. It's a very difficult problem. The payment of property taxes and the shrinking grand list in Hartford has to be addressed. And I understand the rationale for the proposal because it's easier in some senses for commercial property owners, especially investment commercial property owners, to come up with the money to pay a tax bill than it is for many of the residents, owners of residential property, many of whom are on fixed incomes,
Senator
to come
Coleman.
up with the payment for those taxes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Walker.
It goes back to the budget process, that very painful process of looking at what you have in the pie and really managing what you spend. It seems a little backward that you're going to raise rents when you want to bring people into the city. It just doesn't add up. I know we expect commercial property owners to have more money and more funds, but for the small investor who's investing in an apartment building, that's an absolute burden. All that person has to do is not fill your building and move somewhere else. So that is a problem that needs to be tackled and looked at. It needs to be dissected, not just that piece, but the expenditures in the city. And to add to that, if you want to attract more people to come in and move into your buildings, you're going to have to make the streets safer. You can't be thinking about getting rid of cops, and you need people in here.
All right. Is that it? All right, let's move on. Sir, your name and where you live and your question, please.
Good work across party lines. I want to know each of your strategy, since you guys are from Hartford that doesn't have a lot of political diversity, what is your strategy at the state level to work with libertarians, Republicans, and other people that don't have a liberal background?
Ms. Thompson Daniel.
Yes. Well, I'm willing to work with anyone. As a matter of fact, I've had an opportunity to work with some Republicans, some Libertarians, some working family members in the town of Bloomfield. There is some property in the Blue Hills neighborhood that need to be cleaned up, and it's right on our line. So I've had an opportunity to call them up, meet them, work with them, and then I had an opportunity to work with them again with something in Bloomfield where it was a safety issue, and it kept happening over and over, and they were not addressing it. So I was able to go to their meetings and be able to talk to them and have a conversation. So it's a good way to be able to work with everybody by just being able to do a little more, reach out a little more, and reach across the aisle.
I think I have a reputation at the Capitol to be the person to always be able to reach across the aisle and work with my Republican friends. One thing about my Republican friends, they're straight with you. They'll tell you, let me see if this works for me. If it works for me, it works for you, it can make it happen. I'll give you an example. Last year during legislative session, last day, there was a bill that we needed to get passed, was the Hartford Promise Program, an opportunity to give our kids scholarships who graduate to go to school for $5,000 scholarship. This thing needed to get done within 45 minutes. It was 11:25 at night. The call came down to me. I talked to my leadership in the House, went up to the Senate, talked to the Republican senator. In a matter of 10, 15 minutes, we passed that bill for the city of Hartford. That's what you have to be able to do. You got to work with all people, whether they're liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, working family. I have that ability. I have to have that ability because I work with so many different families in the field that I work with. I'm a vice principal, so I work for people, and I work for a magnet school, which is not located in Hartford. I have to have that
Thank you,
ability
Mr.
to work across
McCrory.
the lines, and I have done it.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you. I don't know that we have any libertarians who are members of the Connecticut General Assembly, but I have a great deal of experience in working across the aisle with Republicans extremely closely. As a matter of fact, the task force on gun safety that I referenced earlier was a bipartisan task force. Additionally, we've taken some steps. In the bipartisan task force, Senator McKinney was instrumental in that task force. I worked very closely with him as well as others. There are some other issues, like the reform of the garden ad litem system. I worked very closely with Senator Fasano, who's a Republican, and others who are Republicans. On the eyewitness identification issues and improvements in that system, I worked very closely with Senator Kissel. In the Connecticut General Assembly, we're fortunate that we do not have the same kind of bitter animosity that exists at the federal level. Thank you.
I live in Windsor, so we have to work across the board. Secondly, people at the state level who are running for office for state senator must understand that the reason they're sent there by the voters is to bring in the dough, to get things done, to help the people that they represent. So the greater Hartford region of Hartford, Bloomfield, and Windsor is very diverse. We also have the Working Families Party. You know, my friend Urania is over there. I'm going to mention her party. So regardless of people's political affiliation, we have to work with them. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I agree. All my life, I've grown up in diverse environments with people of different shades of skin, of people with different political ideologies, different beliefs about a lot of things. And in order to be effective in life, and not just in government, not just in politics, you got to work with a lot of people. And that's been my life story. And in Hartford, I had to reach way across the aisle and hold the hands of the Working Families Party. And we've worked wonderfully together. And if the Republicans were in office in Hartford, they would be I would be equally engaged with them on the city council level, because that's the only way to get things done. That's the way to bring the best ideas forward. And so, thank you.
Thank you very much. Ma'am, I'm not sure who you're supporting, but go ahead.
Okay. My name is Brenda Milner, and I live in Bloomfield. And really, I got out of my sick bed to be here because I received this piece today from Senator's opponent. And it troubled me because I retired from House Democrats as a legislative aide for hundreds of years. I started when Jim Kennelly was Speaker, and was only black as a staffer in my office, so I've had a lot of experience. And I was wondering how many of you know, I'm sure that the legislators know, how many minorities represent us up on that hill, that gold dome. You know, there are 151 in the House, 36 in the Senate, and there's only 21 of us up there. So when I see this gentleman, this young man, running and say everything can get done and he's going to do it in a hurry and he's not going to be a career
Ma'am, could you summarize your
blah,
question,
blah,
please?
blah. I just wanted, I mean, I don't know, there's no magic wand. When I hear you talk about that, the gun bill being passed, and it wasn't a good bill, we got the best bill passed. And when I saw the gentleman holding up the repeal sign,
Ma'am, your question, please,
all right,
though.
But my question is, do you realize how long it takes? You have to develop relationship. You just can't submit a bill and automatically it's going to happen. You have to work. You have to develop relationships.
Thank you. You have a question?
Ma'am, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thank
the
you.
I'd be
question.
happy. Okay,
What can you do?
sure. I'd be happy
Yeah.
to.
Do you realize that?
Ma'am?
So first of all, Brenda, as you know full well, I've been engaged. This young man, as you put it, I've been engaged in this city, in government and politics for 25 years, and you know that. And I come from a family that's engaged in this community. And so in terms of getting things done, right, I know something about that. My life story is a testament to working hard and getting things done. So, and
I haven't seen you at the Capitol
I'm
lobbying for the
answering your
gun
question
bill.
now. Thank you. Thank you,
You weren't
Brenda.
at the Capitol
I'm
for
answering your
gun bill.
question now. And you know, if I was sick, I would have gotten out of my sick bed too. And I got 1, 2, several pieces from the state capitol paid for with taxpayer money, talking about all the great things that has been done by your candidate. And so I stand by my record. I stand by the words
All right.
in my brochures.
Mr.
And yes,
Mr.
I am
Wooden,
impatient.
thank you very much.
And I'm going to move fast to try to solve problems.
Thank you,
We've
Council
seen
President.
You at the Capitol lobbying for
Senator,
the bill.
Senator, at this point, no. Brenda, thank you for your question. At this point, we're going to move on. We will not address this question any
Let me
further.
just say-
And I want to make it very clear that no
say that
questions that are
Brenda-
personal. Senator Coleman? Yes. 1 second. From this point on, moving forward, no questions that are personally attacks or directed to a candidate in that fashion will not be
I
tolerated.
wasn't attacking her. I was making a point like anybody else.
All right, we'll give Senator Coleman a chance to respond, and then we're moving on.
Thank you.
All I wanted,
Thank you.
Please be quiet or you'll be asked to leave.
all I
Thank you.
wanted to address was the reference to my newsletter and my mailer, because there are 187 legislators, all of whom sent out newsletters and mailers. That is routine. That's what occurs. And it's completely and absolutely in compliance with the state statute. The belly aching that you hear is really because the candidate Wooden knows that he's behind in this race.
Amen. 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 Woo, woo. Woo, woo.
This is such a bogus argument, and all it serves to do is to create a distraction from the real issues in this race. And I would encourage the voters in the 2nd Senatorial District
All
not
right,
to
Senator,
pay
thank you
one
very much.
heed,
Your time is up.
to
Thank you,
this
Senator.
allegation.
Thank you, Senator. Let's move on. We are just getting warmed up. Councilmember Jennings.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, first of all, I don't think it was clear the question that was asked of the elected officials. I believe the state rep candidates answered the question about what they would do at the legislature, but I didn't hear every one of the state senatorial candidates do anything other than talk about something that did not respond to what they would do. So I'm going to pose a question, and that is, number one, in this district, and this district is comprised of Hartford, Windsor, and Bloomfield. In this district, the city of Hartford, North Hartford, is the poorest area in the country. There are many disparities, health disparities, educational disparities, but absolutely economic disparities. Now, when the city of Hartford comes up with a proposal to develop an economic development program such as a stadium, and the council in Hartford is looking at whether or not it would be economically viable and would it be economically feasible to have this stadium come into the city. My question is this: what does any one of these candidates up here have to bring into the city an economic development plan that will bring jobs for our people, that will bring contracts for our businesses, and that will equalize the tax base? And I believe we need to talk about the economy for the entire district,
Right.
but particularly equalizing North Hartford,
All right.
and questioning why we are in the condition that we're in the city of
Thank you.
Hartford 32 years later.
Thank you, Ms. Jennings. All right. And before any of the candidates respond, just a heads up that we've reached our stadium question quota for the night. This is not really a state legislature issue. It's more of a city council issue.
And can I
So this is the one time
I
that
will withdraw my question on the stadium because excuse me. I would withdraw my question on the stadium, but I would appreciate the fact that you said it is not a state senator or a state issue. It is a city issue. And that is what we attempted to do. But the state senator and the other individuals here need to address
Ms. Jennings.
what is going to happen in order to produce
all right.
economic
So
development
thank you.
for
Okay.
our city.
So keeping in mind that they do have influence and they interact with the other officials involved in this process, we'd like to get each of the candidates to respond with their thoughts to Ms. Jennings' questions.
Just what are they going to do, and what have they done to bring money into
Senator,
this city
Ms. Jennings,
to
thank
address
you.
jobs
We've
and
got-
contracts for
Thank you
Hartford
very much.
residents
Senator
and for
Coleman?
the district?
Mr. Moderator, and with all due respect to you, I would disagree that the stadium is not a state issue. And I would disagree with that because I am concerned about economic development for the benefit of my constituents. I am concerned about my constituents being overly exposed to taxes and their already high tax bills being further increased. Furthermore, write this down, because I bet you, in connection with this stadium issue, the mayor and the city council will be approaching the General Assembly in short order, asking for bonding to finance this proposal. If that's not a state issue, I don't know what is a state issue. But insofar as economic development is concerned, I think the proposal that was on the table for 12B, which included a supermarket and residential units and retail establishments, was the best economic development proposal
Thank you very
that
much,
we all
Mr.
should
Coleman.
have rallied behind.
All right. Mr. Walker.
I have addressed I've tried to address the stadium issue as best I can. I think bringing economic development to the city is a good idea. I wrote about this. However, the homework needed to have been done. Studies should have been done that gave you accurate numbers for sustainable jobs, not just seasonal or part-time jobs. Studies should have been done that produced efficient and effective results that showed that unless you can bring tickets into the stadium, unless you can get the vehicles with the drivers and the people attending the ball games to come into the city and leave at their own will and leisure without running into traffic, that stadium idea and the entire concept needed to be readdressed. I wrote about that. As far as economic development, that's the city council issue. The stadium project is a boondoggle.
Ms. Thompson Daniel.
One of your questions was, what have they done to bring in economic development?
Thank you.
I, as a person who lives in the community of Blue Hills, I've brought in jobs. The Family Dollar store was something that I brought to fruition, and the people who work there are people who live in the community. They do not live outside the community. The managers there live in the community. Then the next thing I had talked about was that instead of us bringing in a store from out of town, why not help the stores we already have here? Why not grow them bigger? Why not have them bring in all the things that we're trying to get from someone from out of town? Why not help the people who are already here helping us? Those are the things I would like to see happen, is to bring more economic development to the people who are already trying to bring a business into the Hartford, who live here in Hartford.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCrory.
I'll just say, I'll address the question about economic development. I've done a number of things to bring businesses, but I think my opponent needs to understand it's not what I have done. See, when you get to the Capitol, it has to be a we thing. You can't do anything by yourself. So when I continue to hear the word, I did this, I did that, no one can do anything in this city and the state by themselves. You have to be able to be a team player and work with people. So what I've done, I've brought in resources. I've brought in companies that are here in the city of Hartford, companies that are downtown, and I insist on them hiring people from my community. I bring in dollars so that we can open our own stores in our community. We talk about the grocery store, ain't none one of them owned by us, okay? And I represent a district that's 80% African American. That's how you bring businesses in. You get your people, because the reality is people who own the companies hire people from that. And lastly, I'm gonna just say this, I didn't get a ton. I'm very, I knew this was gonna happen, this back and forth with my brothers. I'll just say this, I just hope when this primary is over, that our community come back together again. We have too many issues in our community to be fighting one another for. We look like fools up here if we sit here and argue and fight among ourselves. So when this is over, whether who wins or who loses, we need you back in our communities.
Mr. McCrory, thank you very much for your words of encouragement.
I'll just add my amen to that. And briefly on the stadium, and I'm going to be very brief on this point. It's a hot issue. It's been so for less than 3 months, but I'm not going to let the last 3 months get our eye off the ball of the last 3 decades. And I say, there's a lot of people you can elect to say no. And if you want someone to say it louder or more theatrically, then I'm not that person. There are very few people who actually roll up their sleeves every day, work, think about creative solutions to get something done. So that's all on the stadium for me. In terms of economic development, focused on small businesses in our city, meeting with neighborhood groups with our economic development team, saying all of the economic development can't be downtown centered, and so did a tour and to find out the specific needs. support HEDCO, SAMA, both for loans and financial resources, as well as technical assistance
Thank you.
for these businesses. That's the primary engine of job growth, that's hiring local residents, and that's where we need to continue to focus.
Thank you, Council President. All right, that's a hot topic question, so that side's turn, ma'am. So let's move on. Ma'am?
My name is Antoinette McClain. I live at 360 Woodland Street in Hartford. But I have a question to all of you and to all of you out there. When we built the bus stop between Woodland, Albany, to Woodland Street, Albany Avenue, and Woodland, Blue Hills bus stop. Well, what we gonna do about the bench, the bus shelter, and every day? Why
All right. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Let's give the candidates a chance to respond now. They've heard your question. Thank you very much. Ms. Thompson Daniel?
When that question was posed to me about getting bus stops back into the community, I had an opportunity.
Ma'am?
I had an opportunity to meet with President Council Wooden to discuss that matter about the bus stops. So that is something that we are working on. We would like to see the bus stops put back where they are covered so people who catch the bus are not getting wet and not standing there with their children, because I see it every day. I drive by and people are standing there with their kids, whether snow. So our next step is to sit down with the state, because it is a state, those are state highway roads. So we have to sit down with them to be able to get those bus stops back. So we have been trying to work on that, okay?
Okay.
All right. Let's take our next, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's take our next question. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question concerning whether or not, well, I think my question is two parts.
Let's limit it to one question.
Okay, one question. Okay.
That's not two, that's one. Let's wrap it up.
Two one.
You've got a minute to
Okay,
ask your
hold on.
question.
Okay, the question is this, and I think in a few years, a number of the inner city, Hartford is going to have, a number of police officers are going to retire. A number of minority police officers are eligible to retire, right? Okay, so there's going to be the numbers will drop of minority police officers. Right now, this summer, our crime rate went up in the city of Hartford. Homicide and crime, robbery and everything.
This past summer?
This
Okay.
summer. The one that we're in now
Okay.
and the previous one. I'm concerned with a number of youth want to be police officers, but they can't because they were not able to get summer job, because there's no summer job. By the time summer, by the time we're here, there's no summer jobs for our youth. And so they wind up stealing or doing something, getting in trouble, getting something on their record. Okay, I'm concerned with what programs will you set up for the youth? I'm all about the kids. Let's do something about our babies. Let's help our babies not get records. And a way of doing that
What's your
is
question,
helping them
ma'am?
get jobs. What programs will you set up for the youth to keep them busy during the summer so that they will not get in trouble? So if they do want to be something like
All
a
right.
police officer or
Programs
firefighter.
for the youth. Ms. Thompson Daniel.
Sherry, for instance, I've been a big believer in the Fire Explorers, which is something that one of the chiefs at the time wanted to cut the program. I demanded that they keep that program because my son was in that program, and I saw a whole bunch of other students who are in that program. Now, my son is coming home from the military tonight, And that showed me that that program, not only because I'm a divorced mother of 5, but I worked hard to make sure that he stuck with that program, even though he didn't want to join it at 14. But by the time he was 21, he didn't want to leave it. And they told him that he was getting too old. So they're trying to find a way to keep him so he can volunteer and mentor the other students when he get back from the military tonight. So I would support all those programs. Now, I've talked to Chief Ravella, and I asked him, what can we do? Because a lot of programs are being cut because of the budget. We need to make sure that our youth are taken care of first, because they're the ones who have nothing to do. When they get together, they find other things to do that have nothing to do with good, positive things. So we want to make sure that they're stayed in contact with things like that.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson Daniel. Mr. McCrory.
Specifically, you spoke about fire and police. I'm fortunate enough to be the, well, you know, assistant principal at the Public Safety Academy. And our goal and our mission is to prepare our young people for careers in law enforcement, as police and fire. Over 50% of our children come from the city of Hartford. So when they leave our school, they'll be able to take that test and pass it. Unfortunately, the reality is too many of our young people and our young adults are taking those tests to become police and fire, and they can't pass it because the educational level in the city of Hartford has not prepared them properly to pass those tests. If the city of Hartford would did something that I suggested 15 years ago and followed my lead when I had the Benjamin E. Mays Institute for Young Men and the Mary Buckhouse Bethune Academy for young women that send kids off to college and come back as lawyers and doctors, then our situation won't be as bad. As far as employment for our young people, we put ourselves $5 million for summer youth employment in the state of Connecticut. Over $1.3 million came to the city of Hartford. We brought the bacon here. It's the responsibility for these nonprofit providers to provide our children opportunities because we gave them the money to do it.
Thank you, Mr. McCrory. Any other candidates? All right, let's move on, sir.
Yeah, I did want to, Sherry, specifically we've been focused on the police department for a lot of reasons. And as recently as this budget, where at the same time as we cut an additional $8.1 million out so that we would not have, the city council, so we would not have a tax increase, we insisted that police explore a younger program to be a funnel for cadets into the program, that be something that's introduced. So that's a new concept, to have young people able to go into and to start being exposed and trained. And if they meet all the requirements and they go through academy, that they will be guaranteed a position on the police force. And so that's something very concretely that we have done to address that issue.
Since the matter was raised, what was not said was that at the insistence of the president of the council, the budget was cut so that the police department's budget was decreased, and as a result, they have to forego 2 academies. There are 2 police academies that will not occur, and unfortunately, that means, as far as public safety is concerned, that the police department will be understaffed for a period of time. For those of us who are concerned about public safety in Hartford, I think those cuts were ill-advised. For those of us who were concerned and are concerned about young people having an opportunity to go from Explorer programs into the academy and to join the police force, those budget cuts were very ill-advised.
I'm sorry, it's not my turn, but the senator was not accurate in his description of what happened in our budget process.
All right, thank you. Each of the candidates have a singular chance to speak. Mr. Walker.
I was with these fine men earlier today, and I had the unfortunate opportunity to sit between them. But so I'm used to it. Municipalities control their hiring policies and procedures. I think in a city, in any urban environment, where we start looking at cutting police officers, especially when your streets are not crime-free, that's a drastic step to take. I hate to say ill-advised, but I describe it somewhat closer. And if we don't take care of our young men and our young kids today, and if we don't find opportunities for them out there, you're going to pay for it later. When you spend more money on prison systems, and when you spend more money putting our kids behind bars, more than you spend on educating them, something is wrong with this picture.
All right, sir.
you.
Sir,
It's my
Go ahead.
question, but it was answered,
And-
I
and
think, by
ladies-
Douglas McCurry. I go to Birdolph Health Center. I go to Birdolph Health Center. I knew about the issue about the women's was closing, but why couldn't my other Eric help out too? He lives in a section of the Blue Hills neighborhood. Didn't he know about the issue? I don't know, because it was in the North End News that Douglas fixed it. Because I guess somebody did call you later, sure. But my question to all your candidates is, I'm afraid that there'll be more cuts with this same garbage, because I don't know if it's the North End, I don't know what it is, but this health center, and I go on only to say that it's St. Francis, it could be Harvard Hospital, it could be it could be UConn, but how in the future can we fix this so I don't feel shaky going to it? Then they tell me later, I'm sorry, they want to trim the program. I don't mean, not the health center, but the St. Francis itself wants to cut it. Why can't they tell you slowly so you could either A, go to a new doctor, because you would have to change doctors. You know that, Douglas.
all right,
So
sir. Let's wrap up your question.
Can I just finish it? In this case, it was women's health, everybody. But in this case, it really bothers me that we have to take it on the backs of St. Francis.
All right, and just a heads up, in the effort of being respectful of the time that the library is closing, this is going to be our last question from the audience. And this is going to be our last question from the audience, and we'll let Mr. Corey start.
So if you heard Eddie, he said that I fixed it, but I'm going to say this, I'm not an I person. We fixed it. Members of our delegation worked together and fixed that situation. But I'll say this, Eddie, you're absolutely right. It was brought to our attention, though, by the advocates who understand the need for keep that place open. And I'm glad, and that's the responsibility. Although we are representatives and we work at the Capitol, we represent you. And so when there is a problem like that, it's your responsibility to come tell us. And you did, and you guys told us that, and we fixed the problem. But like you said, it's a long-term problem. The St. Francis were not right in what they were doing. We sat down with them, we explained it, we put a plan together to make it work for Birdolph. But the reality is the city of Hartford are tenants at Birdolph, and they need to step up their game also, because there's another program, that MyOp program, that we're thinking about cutting in the future. So I'll just say this. You did your job, we did our job, and that's how government is supposed to work.
All right. Would any of the other candidates like to respond? No? All right. At this time, ladies, I'm sorry. The library is closing soon, and we want to give each of the candidates an opportunity to wrap up their thoughts. Ma'am, thank you very much. All right, we're going to start with our senatorial candidates. Mr. Walker, you can lead us off with, ma'am. All right, ma'am, in the effort of being respectful of the time the library is closing, I, as the moderator, am deciding to move on. We're going to give the candidates an opportunity to wrap their thoughts up. If they'd like to address your question in their conversation, then they can. You've mentioned that it's about the food desert. They're aware of that. And now we're going to give Mr. Walker a chance to give his 2 minutes to respond and wrap up your final thoughts.
Your final thoughts. I want to thank Hartford Votes for inviting me. It was a rocky road. I want to thank my opponents who are running in the race, the representatives, the people who are running for the representative position. We have a fine crew of people who are looking to get to the state capitol to represent. I am a people personality where I get along with folks. I know that what needs to happen is the person running for this seat at present must open the lines of communication. What do I mean by that? The state senator must meet with the Hartford City Council, not just pick up a phone, but they must meet. He must do the same thing with the Bloomfield Town Council and the Windsor Town Council, because that way you get to find out what the pressing issues are in each town. The challenges in each town are unique. This particular forum brought to light some things that I wasn't aware of that really were troubling Hartford. Not the major ones, but the minor ones. So starting to talk to each other will help us to maybe help to provide advice to council people, maybe to lead them towards a specific grant, or how to work with them to help manage their budgets. So I think Senator Coleman needs to improve in that particular area. And unless we start going out, talking to people, shaking hands, and finding out what's their issues are, we're gonna have this problem. I think we can do a lot better. I hope you vote for me come August 12th. Thank you much.
All right. We are going to alternate here and have one of the representative candidates speak. Ms. Thompson Daniel, you have 2 minutes on your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are that we need jobs, we need better education in our community, and we need something for our youth to do. Otherwise, we are going to be a ruined city. We need to make sure that we have programs in place for our youth. The thought is that if we have something for our youth to do, they will be occupied, such as whether it's a playground, whether it is a job, whether it is some after-school activity. Here, I've been able to work with Capital Community College. One of my sons was able to attend a how to do a mobile app program. So these are certain things that we need to make sure as parents we find for our children to do. I've been able to work with State Rep Douglas McCory on projects. I've worked with Sean Wooden on different things. I've worked with Mr. Coleman on a few things, and I've also worked with Linwood Walker on a few things. So I'm able to work with anybody, and I'm able to do something. When I'm called, when I'm asked to do something, I go and I do what I'm supposed to do, and that is for the work of the community.
All right. Senator Coleman.
I also want to thank the sponsors of this forum. I want to thank the moderator, and most of all, I want to thank those of you who are in the audience who chose to spend some time with us this evening. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your participation. I am very proud of the fact that for 20 years, I've served in the state Senate, and what that means to me is that the voters in the 2nd Senatorial District had an opportunity 10 times to come to the polls and vote for me, and they did so overwhelmingly, and they've returned me to the state Senate 10 times. And when they asked me to help them prevent Rawson School from closing, I was happy to intervene, and as a result of our efforts together, we not only preserved Rawson School, saved it from closing, but we also got money in order to renovate the school to a state-of-the-art school. Similarly, when the residents in Windsor, because of the realignment of West Wolcott Avenue, were having difficulty getting from Columbia Road onto that main road, they called me. And I was able to work with them to have a traffic signal installed at that intersection to make their lives so much easier, enable them to get out during the morning rush hour and get in during the evening rush hour. And it's just things like those that propel me to want to continue to serve in the state Senate. As a leader, as a co-chair of the Judiciary Committee, and in a position to use and exercise whatever influence I have in behalf of the 2nd Senatorial District.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senator. All right, let's go to Mr. McCrory. You will also have 2 minutes.
So, again, I want to thank everyone for coming out. There's a lot of things you could have done tonight, but you took it upon yourself to come here, your elected officials, talk about why they should be in office and why they shouldn't be in office. I want to thank you as a moderator. You did a great job. You do a great job on TV.
Thank you.
So you heard a lot from us tonight. I'm a young man that's been in office for 10 years. I ran in office, the first time I ran against someone who has been in office for 16 years. The community came out and overwhelmingly supported me. As I've been out talking to our community, my community has told me that you've done a great job, and they asked me to continue to do a good job. It takes you 6 to 8 years to make any effective change at the state capitol. I don't think our community can wait another 6 to 8 years for someone who are upstart just coming to get there. I'm in a leadership position. I'm a majority leader. I'm a majority leader in the House. I earned that spot. I'm respected by my colleagues. I'm respected in my community. I'm an educator. I'm a father. I'm a husband. And I'm a mentor to a whole lot of people in our community. A lot of young people who came through this school system, I taught them. And I have very good relationships with their parents. I don't think we need to change what is working. You haven't heard one thing from my opponent that I haven't been doing. I'm doing a pretty good job, I believe, but I can do more. With your support, if you put me back in office, that's a mandate. I get my power. If you ever see me at the Capitol, you know how I operate. I don't mix my words, and I stand strong for my community because we need strong leadership up at the state capitol. And I'm going to continue to deliver that if you put me back in office. I thank you again. Go out and tell your people, don't forget to come out and vote August 12th. It's Doug McCrory, your state representative.
All right. Last but not least, Mr. Wooden.
So I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. The more we can communicate, I think the better it is for this district. And tonight, you've heard a lot from people who I think maybe they want to run for mayor of Hartford because you hear a lot about what's wrong with the city and the nuts and bolts of Hartford, but I didn't hear a lot of solutions. And that's what's wrong with politics today. People can say no and can point to problems, but pointing to solutions, that's a lot harder, right? I respect anybody who serves in public office. You know, this stuff is hard. I get it, right? Me, I love this city, this district. I was born and raised here, and youngest of 6 kids, and I have a passion that my parents instilled in me to give back. I was successful, went off to law school, worked my way up from the bottom of the law firm to the largest, most prestigious law firm in this state to become a partner. I don't apologize for that ambition, for that success, right? I earned a scholarship to Trinity College. I worked hard because I knew my parents couldn't afford to pay for it, right? So I did that, and I don't apologize for being ambitious. We all need to be ambitious for our community, for our future. And so after 3 decades of some leadership in our community, I think it's healthy to have some new ideas, some new energy, some new passion. I think it's healthy. It's not something for us to be upset about. It's something for us to embrace and cherish. Voters, you have a choice. Most of those years that were talked about, there wasn't a choice. You got one now. And I would be honored to serve as your state senator. Thank you.
All right. And with that, we will conclude. It's 7:40, the time we promised to get you out of here. I'm a TV guy. I'm used to obeying the clock.